Channing Ferrer is Chief Revenue Officer and CEO of the Americas at Brevo, where he drives go to market strategy and revenue growth globally. With that, we're thrilled to have you at the live event, Channing, and I am very much looking forward to hearing your presentation to the audience.
Great. Well, thank you, Michael, and pleasure to be here. Excited to be here. Why don't I dive right in and let's talk about the marketing AI arms race, really the battle for attention, the attention economy. So, as we know, AI gives us infinite content. We have this ability now to create content at any given point, any time, any way, a variety of very interesting outputs from that. But consumers have a very finite attention. And we can't create additional attention span for consumers. They only have so much. And we're humans, we're not AI. So, how do we manage this? How do we find that balance is the big question. Every company now can generate all this content, but really the winner is wherever you can find engagement. And I'm going to talk a little bit about how to create that engagement and how content creation and engaging with customers are done in different ways. And some of the research we've done very recently here, actually at Brevo, to help us understand and help all of our clients and everyone really understand what's going on with this war for attention. So I've got a bunch of different topics that I'm going to run us through. And we'll talk a little bit about kind of what's going on in this arms race for attention. We'll talk about output volumes versus focus on attention. We'll talk about disengagement that we're seeing, orchestration, the importance of really data layers, and then why behind various kind of ways of engaging with people, the how and the why, and then ultimately what we're seeing in terms of who's winning this race. So let me jump right through this. So as I mentioned, we've got this arm race. It's here, and we see a lot of content being created. Let me talk a little bit about numbers for a second. And companies are scaling content left and right. We're seeing 93% of marketers, I thought this almost would be 100% now, but obviously nearly all marketers are using AI to create content faster. We're seeing 42% more content being created monthly. Now, if you compound that, it's actually over 5,000% increase annually. So, and if we put this into numbers, that means we used to be seeing one person maybe put out one piece of content. Now with AI, that same person's putting out 50 pieces of content. And that's our kind of 5,000% compounding. So just high volumes. An interesting story on this. I was talking to our PR agency about some content the other day. They reached out to a blogger to try to engage that blogger on some content that was being created. It was just an AI bot that was creating the blog. It looked like a human. It had an image of a human and everything, but it was just an AI bot. There's lots of those that exist out there. So as we get to that 5,000% growth, it's very real, and it happens a lot. There's a lot of AI-driven content. What's interesting, it's all very good content. It's all very hard to differentiate, of course. So then we see additionally this increase in AI adoption, of course, and we're finding that a large growth in adoption over the past couple of years beyond just content creation. It's a variety of use cases for AI. On top of that, we have 74% of our web pages contain generated content. And then, of course, 75% of businesses are reporting AI integration into the Martech stack. So AI exists everywhere. We know that. And of course, it's driving a ton of marketing content. The old world, I used to work at HubSpot, and I'll say old, this isn't even that old, but it used to be generate interesting content and people will find you. And unfortunately, you can't differentiate anymore. It's so hard to differentiate with content. That old world of inbound marketing just isn't really working as well anymore. AI is a machine. It's creating this content on its own with our guidance, of course, but it's creating lots and lots of content at a volume that humans can't really replicate. But human attention is static. We're really finite in what we focus on. We don't have an infinite ability to create attention spans and an infinite ability to read information, to consume information via emails, via text, via the web. So our attention hasn't changed over time. We still have the same amount of ability to consume and ability to focus while there's this massive volume of scale of content and information flowing out there. That's the problem that we're talking about. So let's talk a little bit about what we're seeing here in terms of burnout. And I'm going to look at this through the lens of email consumption, first of all. So content can be consumed and distributed, obviously, in a lot of different ways, but I'm going to focus on email for a moment. So average email open rate right now is about 20%, just over 20% globally. And we did a study over several hundred companies to determine this. High volume senders, so companies that send lots of email, ultimately that open rate drops to 16%. So again, as you send more email, you actually get less engagement with that email. Further to that point, the conversion rate, CTR conversion rate, drops from an average of 2.27 down to 1.54%. So we're seeing a much bigger drop off as well in the conversion rate. So you're seeing less open rates and less conversion rates, and then a higher unsubscribe rate. Of course, I didn't call that out here, but also a higher unsubscribe rate. So as we increase that volume, we're seeing less and less consumption of it. There's this silent disengagement that we're seeing. People aren't drastically unsubscribing as they're getting more and more content, more and more email. They're just ignoring it. And that process of ignoring isn't as measurable. It's harder to recognize, but it's happening. It's happening very clearly through email. Customers are no longer kind of reading and evaluating each message. They've got bots and tools that help do this, or they just ignore. And there's a lot of that happening. Again, unsubscribe rates are not changing that drastically, but we are seeing, again, click-through rates, open rates drop off drastically. So this idea of attention, once again, is very clear, whereas consumers are focusing on what they really want to care about and ignoring things they don't care about. And that's a little less measurable than we like. So here's another way to look at this. We looked at emails, open rates, click-through rates, and unsubscribe rates over the past year, 2025. We looked at this. And email volume typically does increase over the course of a year. Typically, as you get into the November, December shopping season, you see slightly higher email volumes. So that's not abnormal to see this sort of an upward trend over the course of a year. But as you see that sort of upward trend, we would think open rates typically would stay the same, but they're not. So this goes back to the point I raised earlier. As we see increases in volume, we're actually seeing a decrease in open rates, meaning that it's not holding steady. It's actually reducing open rates as you increase that volume of content being distributed. So people, as they get more and more content, they're actually becoming more and more ignorant to the content, more and more less interested in the content, and they're opening less and less of that content as well. So we're seeing kind of opposite direction happen here. So as volume goes up, open rates are going down, and also click-through rates are going down, which is a derivative of usually of open rates. We spoke to a bunch of people about this, and a bunch of folks who focus on content distribution, email distribution, or other types of content distribution, and they gave some interesting feedback. So here we go from Johan, who focuses a lot on this area. When you increase your send frequency, it generates a drop in revenue per email and an exponential rise in unsubscribes. So it's not really a game of more emails that we need. You need better ways to connect, and his recommendation is omnichannel. What is that winning solution? So what does omnichannel mean? How should we engage most effectively? And by the way, has anyone actually figured this out is a question that we also asked. So if I look at averages here, and again, I'm focused on email distribution. So when I look at averages, we see our open rate that I talked about earlier at just over 20%. We see our click-through rate at 2.25%, and then an unsubscribe rate. So there are some people, and we can look at it through general emails or transactional emails. Both have the same trends. You can see kind of both numbers here are similar. But the top 10% producers, those who are most effective at distributing this content via email, what we find there is something very interesting, is their open rates are nearly double that of the average. Their click-through rates are more than double, in both cases actually, more than double that of the average, and also significant drop-off in unsubscribe rates. And once again, this happens to all marketing emails or transactional emails. Transactional are kind of looking for buyers of products. So once again, there's clearly a grouping of content distributors, I would say, that are out there that have figured this out, and they're performing well at a much, much better rate than the averages. What are they doing? So what we're finding, it's very much precision over volume. And the key is really focusing in on what do people want to consume? How do they want to consume this content? And precision, understanding their needs. The shift is towards orchestration. How do you orchestrate and engage with a consumer, with a person, with a reader of content in the way that they want to be engaged with, the way they want to read it. And here's another quote we got from Will Pearson: the teams that maintain strong engagement treat list quality as a KPI. They're really managing those lists. They're making sure they're monitoring who's getting what sort of emails, and understanding that at different thresholds and volumes, you need to think about segmentation and engagement in very different ways. Omni-channel orchestration seems to be the direction that we're getting this feedback on. We're hearing connect with people in the way they want to be connected with for content. And so what does omni-channel really mean? I think of this as bespoke marketing. We're creating a custom marketing solution. We're engaging with those consumers, those individuals, the way that they want to be engaged with. And that might be through an email, that might be through other types of content. Omnichannel is the first step. We always would think, let's engage different ways. But omnichannel, when you look at it through content distribution, wasn't necessarily the solution. It was just a path towards the solution. Bespoke marketing is really the next phase of this. And bespoke marketing means let's engage with people the way they want. How do we know how they want to be engaged with? Well, they give us signals, and those signals we can collect through data. So we can understand what people want. Hyper-contextualized engagement is ultimately what they're looking for. Certain individuals like to read text. Other individuals like to read emails. Other individuals like to read WhatsApp or have a push notification sent to them when they're walking through the mall. And at different times of the day, different times of the week, that might even change. We need to understand those behaviors, those consumer behaviors. We need to understand individual preferences, and we need to be able to engage with people the way they want to engage with at the time of where they are in their day, in their life. And that's hard to do, but that's where this idea of contextual engagement or bespoke marketing really comes into play. The current model, or even the legacy model, I might say, was just send more. We'll send more campaigns. We'll send more emails. We'll send more content. We'll create more blog posts. We'll do more automation. More would get you to the end game, because through more content and more content, you thought you would have more eyes on your content. You thought you'd get more engagement, and more would ultimately work. It doesn't work anymore, because back to the point earlier with AI, it's so easy to create more. We have just so much more information out there that people are ignoring it. The attention war. Bespoke marketing allows us to ultimately get better at things. Let's get better at timing, better at coordinating how this content's being distributed, email, text, online, better at segmenting, better at data, better at orchestration, and much better at relevance. Relevance really is the key to bespoke marketing, where we understand the relevance of what someone wants at the time of where they are. Contextually informed information and content is critical, and the data that drives that is ultimately what drives bespoke marketing. So a variety of ways of distributing content, of course. We can think of email, SMS, WhatsApp, push notifications. These are all different engagement models. And as we look at these different engagement models, we need to understand typically how do we want to use them. And there's kind of a standard layer here I can look at. Email might be used in a more long story format, whereas SMS might be more of an urgency channel. Push notifications might be based off of geofencing of when someone's walking around or a habit that they're building and so on. So we have typical use cases, and then we can apply those typical use cases to individuals, knowing what their preferences are and how they like to consume information, where we begin to see their open rates increase or their read rates or engagement rates increase. We can lean into those with each individual. So once again, data layer is critical, and orchestrating this sort of engagement model is the way you can ultimately get the right type of readership and viewership. So again, a variety of quotes from a variety of people here that are beginning to do this. And these are a mix of companies that are doing it. These are a mix of consulting firms, marketing agencies that are building out these more bespoke marketing models, and ultimately leveraging a mix of engagements through SMS, WhatsApp, email, push notifications, online content, and understanding how to use that content in the way that the consumer wants to consume that information is really the critical point. That's the orchestration of data. That's the orchestration layer of bespoke marketing. That's ultimately the crux to the solution. The companies that are winning today, they're winning the attention battle because they're able to orchestrate that data. They're able to leverage the data and drive the information that consumers really want to see and read at the time and at the place where they want to be. And we can look at this through a slightly different lens. I can look at this through the lens of some consumer products. Spotify uses curated data to create unique experiences. Nike allows consumers to create personalized products. And of course, Netflix has an algorithm that creates personalized content. And these are examples of ways that personalized content drives much more attention And again, this isn't email. This is kind of a more broader view of thinking about that attention war that we talked about. So finally, who wins this battle? Who wins the war? And how do we go about winning? Well, the companies that are winning are the ones that are creating the most relevance for our consumers. And that relevance is driven through bespoke marketing. The future belongs to brands that are really practicing this idea of creating bespoke marketing, orchestration layer being the key, and driving a personalized experience for the consumer. So that was the findings that we had. I thought I'd share those insights, and hopefully that gives people a little bit of information. So thank you for the time.
Channing, that was fantastic and really very relevant, I think, for the event today. I know that quite a few people that are listening will have some questions on how all of this applies to their organizations. So if you're listening in and you have some specific questions, we have an opportunity for you to type those into the Q&A box that you see in front of you, and we'll get to as many of those as we can on our next Q&A panel, which Channing will be joining in just a few minutes.
Thank you.